Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Assets, Projects and Strategy Committee meeting. Could I ask everyone to note the fire safety instruction that on hearing the alarm you should leave the chamber via the double doors at the back, exit the building through the main entrance and congregate in the car park. Also, please switch off your mobile phone and turn any other electronic devices being used to silent. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting is subject to an internet webcast recording where the proceedings are capable of repeated viewing. If you are seated in the public area of the council chamber, it's likely that your image will be captured by the recording cameras and result in your image becoming part of the broadcast. This may infringe on human rights, and if you wish to avoid this, you should leave the public seating area in the main body of the council chamber and move to the upper public gallery. Members, that if for any reason you are not present for the whole of a debate on an item, you will not be allowed to vote on that item. Item 1 is apologies for absence. Ms Wyatt, are there any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. There are no apologies this evening.
Fantastic, thank you. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations to be made? No, fantastic. Item 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting on the 17th of September 2025. Is it agreed that I sign as a correct record the minutes of the Assets, Projects and Strategy Committee meeting held on the 17th of September 2025, which begin on page 5 of the agenda? Thank you. Item 4 is the Chair's update. The report begins on page 13 of the agenda. Are there any questions on the report? Councillor Poppy.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things really, and probably more omissions as opposed to anything wrong with the report that I've read. It's really my favourite thing, the Shenfield Cricket Club. That's not really an update. It's been ongoing for about 10 years, so you're not telling me something I don't already know, and I can drive past and find out that the sea van's gone. So I mean, it's so if that's a criticism, I apologise, but it's just not telling me anything. My other question is really again about the halls, and I'd like to sort of make it a bigger question, and probably offline, not for this meeting, but we've had ongoing conversations about Hutton Poplars Hall, Hutton Poplars Lodge. There's always, you know, the nursery, what's going on, have we signed a lease yet? Then we've had a couple of years ago at the finance meeting, we agreed that the soup kitchen would go into Hutton Poplars Hall, and that's now pulled out, and you know, it's carried on. Snap, are they ever going into the Nightingale Centre? So is there a chance of getting, as I say, offline, because it's going to be, you know, sensitive, I would say, but how much money we've spent so far on these halls in the last couple of years, and none of them are being used? How much money have we lost in revenue that we could have had over the last couple of years? And you know, let members know that side of things.
Thank you. I believe at the last meeting we had an update on where the rental situations were on most of them, and we can bring an update of that report to the next meeting. I think some of that was in pink, so for the cricket club example and others where there are commercially sensitive negotiations going on, that level of update can be provided, and in turn I'm more than happy for officers to update yourself and others of where we are at appropriate time. To the wider point, I don't see any issue with providing financial updates on where we are. It is worth noting that some examples, and I may get it slightly wrong this, and Mr Anderson who updated last time, but things like the lodge, the technical works that were needed there on the heating and other provision would have meant there was no necessary revenue provision, but we can give you those full details offline as well, because some circumstances tendency that there was no gain to be made if other choices have been made. In other cases there is. That's the choices we make, but certainly those figures can be provided in a commercially confidential, appropriate way.
But I think that I agree. But I think there's also questions about, you know, what we've spent on almost Phoebe probably could sort this more than I can. But you know, what have we done in Poplars Hall for the lodge, for the charity that are now not going to go there? Did we have any kind of lease with them beforehand so that we can maybe try and get some of that money back now that they've pulled out, or is it just lost? Is it just something we've done? So I think it's a longer conversation, and as I say, I'm probably offline. So
certainly that conversation can happen. It's a fair point to make. In turn, I think in some circumstances there's we can debate it technically, but there's, as I understand it, no money is lost. It just may be that we've provided potentially some services that a future tenant may not need or require, maybe above and beyond what was needed. But nevertheless, there's no perfect example in asset management. As you will often tell us, you haven't always bought at the lows and sold at the highs, and you can't always rent at the highs and not lose at the lows. But we will do what we can, and it's a fair and valid point. And actually, I think it's part, as we build the asset management strategy and the regular reports we have, it's a useful thing to have, understanding where we are, impact of choices, etc. Fantastic. Any other questions? Councillor Murphy.
Hi, just an update on Herongate Village Hall from our end. We held a meeting last Monday evening in the football club, and it was discussed at length, and there was various residents there who were unhappy with the ongoing negotiations that are happening with Herongate Village, St Andrew's Church, with the parking and all the rest of it. We came to the very reluctant decision that maybe that site isn't appropriate, and now we have been given a chance, a lifeline. The football club are willing to entertain a discussion as to maybe we might be able to do something with them. But I can't give you any more information because I haven't had a meeting with them yet. But that's where we are. So if it is in fact going to be demolished, demolish it. I don't know what, I don't know what else to say. I can't say anything else because the parking issues down there are not going away. And when I looked at, there was about 6 residents there. It's going to immediately impact on, at the end of the day, for whatever dreams we want, it's got to be practicable, and it's also got to be in a proper place. And I think maybe the football club might be a better place for it. So that's just that. All right?
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Good and positive to hear that solutions may be found for that area, and recognising it's gone from effectively a position 20 years ago of having 3 community halls with overcapacity to none with a considerable undercapacity, and the problems have ironically increased in the actual surviving in transport and traffic rather than decreased, while hall usage and availability has gone. So fantastic to hear, and I think from my own personal perspective, while we've got to say for demolition of thank you to yourself, to Councillor Marsh, to Councillor Baldock, and in turn to the Parish Council, who throughout this have been positive in trying to find a solution, a viable way forward. We haven't for that site, but as you say, maybe the site was never right, hence it was the least preferred of the 3 original halls. If we can find a future solution, that's a great thing to happen. And it's an example where some things aren't perfect, but you keep working at it, maybe you can get a solution. So thank you for that. I have no other questions on that report. Fantastic. We now move on to item 5, the Creative Wayfinding and Public Realm Scheme for Brentwood, Shenfield and Ingatestone High Street. The report begins on page 21 of the agenda. Ms Edmonds, do you have anything to add?
Not at this time, Chair, but I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I will move the recommendations that are set out on page 21 and 22. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that, thank you. Reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or Councillor Chinnery?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. I think it's a very good idea to have new kind of wayfinding materials and signposts and whatnot. I just wanted to know, have there been any other examples of Placemark doing this work and implementing it? Just because I think the styles are quite interesting, to put it politely, and I just wanted to kind of see where it has been kind of implemented before. Thank you.
Ms Evans?
I can certainly go back to our wayfinding consultants and ask them to provide some examples.
It is worth noting we are aware they've worked on several different high streets and areas. Whilst each solution, I think it's fair to say, and the 3 councillors are on the strategic SAMWAG, whatever the acronym is, for potentially the worst acronym committee in the council, and there are many that could challenge it. Each of them is unique and bespoke based on research, but nevertheless the approach is similar. So we can show you some of those approaches and how they've worked. And in turn, I think it's also worth noting as we go through this process and practical delivery, some of the items you see in the concept will not end up in the final version because they just don't work. But it's getting from the concept, the idea of actually being creative and trying to find something that's unique for us, I think is important. Because I don't know about you, but part of my own fear in progressing and going forward is that Brentwood's identity is lost within something bigger, and Ingatestone's identity is lost, and Shenfield's identity lost. A, I want them to be linked, but B, I want them to have their own identity separate from other areas as far as we can possibly take it. Councillor Poppy.
Thank you, Chair. Really backing up what you've just said to some extent. I thought the stuff we were shown on that working group were really, really good, and I quite liked them. I did pass it on to the group for their feedback, which Laurie's had back from there. And I will say one of the things that it's all, you know, it's nice people's personal opinions, but it's not really for us as residents of Brentwood. These are for people that are visiting Brentwood. They're not, you know, it's, and I just thought they were interesting, and I really go for the old saying of all publicity is good publicity. I think if people are talking about it, it will be a good result. So even if they don't like it, it's going to be a good result.
Thank you. Councillor Kendall.
Thanks, Chair. Just to say first off, I welcome the investment that's been made. I mean, 175,000 is quite a big chunk of money, but it's obviously Shenfield, Brentwood and in Ingatestone. So I'm pleased to see that that's happening, because some of these signs that we've got have been there for a long, long time and certainly need updating. In terms of designs, I'll take what Councillor probably says. I think it's one of those situations when you look at the designs, we've all probably individually got our own personal views. Some we like, some perhaps we maybe don't like so much, but that's always the way with design, isn't it? I think if you look at 1.9, the number of different groups that have spoken to, the schools in particular, I think is good, and various other bodies and groups. I think it's good that they've consulted sort of, you know, quite widely, because they are going to get a fair amount of input that comes through. I think when we do make the change, there'll always be some people that love it, and perhaps some who aren't so sure. But in time, you know, things do grow. But the key thing is to be able to find the different things that we've got in the town. And, you know, the clearer the signposting we've got, to me, the better. Because particularly as you come up from a station, there's almost this assumption everyone knows where the high street is, where they should go. And, you know, we definitely need to do this. So I'm just pleased it's moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kendall. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Much along the same lines, I really welcome the report. I think it's excellent. I think the level of engagement is excellent, particularly with the youngsters and the children. And I admit, having looked at it online, the colours are quite interesting. But I think what it does show, we've got pride in our towns, our high streets, and it still retains the historical legacy, but it brings it up to date with today's needs. So I think it's just a case of finding the right level. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not so keen. I think, you know, with the conservation areas that we have in Brentwood, it's a historical town, we have heritage, and I think that some of these designs would make us look a little bit like one of those new towns like Basildon or Milton Keynes. I think that we could do better in regards to the evening, maybe illuminating trees and things like that for the nighttime economy, and in the morning maybe for the daytime scene, businesses, removing some street clutter, you know, maybe getting rid of some of those phone booths that look tatty and stuff like that would go a long way to improving our street scene. I do appreciate the comments that Councillor Kendall has made in regards to, you know, people coming to town, coming out of the train station, the amount of times that people have stopped me and asked exactly that, where is the high street? You'd be surprised. So yeah, some signage, I think if it was more in keeping with our heritage, that would be great. Something that kind of is invisible to residents that live here, but would still stand out to visitors, that'd be great. I'm really interested to know where some of these questions come from. If Brentwood had a personality, how would you describe it? And if Brentwood had a soundtrack or theme song, what would it be? And, you know, I find that very interesting. I'd love to know where that come from, not literally now, but when I look at the demographic of Brentwood, if we look at between the 25 and 64-year-olds, we're looking around about 56% of the population of Brentwood. Yeah, not so much the 2, 3, 4-year-olds. I appreciate you asking and consulting with them. And if you'd asked me what I'd like to see at that age, I'd probably said Andy Pandy and the Wombles. You know, would I like to see a dustbin modelled as a Womble today? Well, actually, probably not. That's not a bad idea. It'd encourage people to use it, wouldn't it? But you get what I mean. I'm not certain that that demographic, that sample of people that we're asking, is a true reflection of what the borough needs. Thank you, Chair. They are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I think, is there anyone else who wishes to? Councillor Lewis.
I think it's very easy to be cynical about these things, but Brentwood is the place we live and love, and we should be proud of it. So a little bit of signage, not only for tourists, but also for the people that live here, to remind them on a daily basis of what we got, because it's very easy forgotten.
Thank you. Councillor Gorton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not a member of this committee, so thank you for letting me speak. This item was briefly discussed at last Thursday's Ingatestone Parish Council meeting, and it was generally welcome. Some doubt was expressed about the colour scheme suggested for Ingatestone, but I note that Ingatestone Parish Council was amongst the consultees, so presumably they had their say at that stage, but generally positive.
Thank you. Anyone else wishes to speak on this item? No? In that case, the seconder, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I think I'd just like to echo the fact that I liked the extent of the consultation. I think this signage and wayfinding is for the future and for young people who will grow up in the town. So maybe they're young now, but soon they'll be part of the major demographic. I personally think anything that appeals to younger people and brings more youthful people is not a bad idea either. I think I'd just like to commend Laurie and the work that she's done along with the team, because it has been extensive, and you can see that from these appendices and the high number of discussions that we had in advance of this meeting with all parties. I'm very supportive of it, and as Councillor Poppy mentioned, you know, these concepts will evolve as they're implemented as well. Nobody's suggesting this is the final thing that we'll see on the streets. This is for us to approve moving forward in this direction and implementing some much needed new street furniture and signage.
Thank you. From my own perspective, it's also worth noting and thanking the many consultees, so Larchwood Primary, the Big Smile Collective, Black and Being Essex, and Helen's Primary, Ingatestone Parish Council, Councillor Gordon mentioned, Brentwood Museum, Endeavour Youth Club, and the several hundred residents who filled out forms at the Family Fun Days and the open JOT form as well. So the consultation was fairly broad, and in turn to thank Charlotte Robinson, who was effectively our creative consultant and research consultant, who's added a lot of work to this and also worked with various people through the Creative Hub in King George's. We will now vote on the recommendations on page 21 and 22 of the agenda. All those in favour? Those against? And no abstentions. The motion is carried. Thank you, members. Item 6 is fees and charges. The report begins on page 169 of your agenda. There is also an updated appendix on your desk in front of you after a slight typo in the original version. Mrs Barnes, is there anything to add?
No, Chair, nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now move the recommendation set out on page 169. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that, thank you.
Would anyone like to speak on this item? Councillor Poppy.
Only for the hell of it. Has anyone ever actually paid 400 odd quid to rent a chamber? Because I just can't believe anybody actually ever had. No, I didn't think so. I've got good news for you, because Keith Parker has agreed that he will have his office dinner and dance here if that's okay. So he mentioned it earlier, but you haven't seen what the dress code is. Yeah.
Both thank you and I'm terrified at the same time. Thank you, Councillor Parker. That's the front page of the Gazette story we never want to see. If no one else wishes to speak on this item, we will now move to the vote on the recommendations, page 169 of the agenda. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, members. Item 7 is the Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan. The report begins on page 177 of the agenda. Ms Corey, anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to add, but happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Ms Corey's first time at the Asset Project Committee, so we've all got to be mean, as is tradition. She specifically asked me to be nice, so I've added that there for your own experience and joy. Has anyone got any questions on the plan at all? Councillor Gorton.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'm a bit surprised that this has come to this committee and not Clean and Green. Perhaps you could explain why that is so. Thank you.
Thank you. It comes under this committee's remit, as does any borough-wide strategy of this context, because it's infrastructure. Any infrastructure element comes under, except for, ironically, the infrastructure plan, which comes under F&R. But infrastructure strategies, plans, projects such as this will appear under this committee's agenda, because it's seen as an infrastructure item, not necessarily an environmental item, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Can I follow up with... many thanks to Joe Corrie for producing an excellent report. And I would just emphasise that the footpath and cycleways working group, of which I'm a member, has been doing quite a lot of work on the LC WIP, particularly on cycle paths, and particularly on route number 1 from which runs from Romford Station all the way to Brentwood Town Centre, and all the work on the Havering side, on the other side of the M25, at least as far as Harold Wood, is now complete, I understand, and also the crossing of the Junction 28 roundabout, extra two-con crossings have been provided there, and the cycleway now ends near the Shell station in Brook Street. So it's just the remaining section from Brook Street to the town centre which remains to be done. There was a presentation to members, there was a briefing to members back late September, and I know there's some difference of opinion on this, but personally it's something I would very much like to see go ahead. I think we've mitigated the worst of the problem with the hill on London Road by suggesting that the route goes up Westwood Avenue to Cavernous Road, eliminating the steepest bit of London Road where cyclists might be tempted to speed and it could be a danger to pedestrians. I understand that the funding, I understand that a decision to whether to go ahead with the scheme will be taken by Essex Cabinet early in the new year. We haven't got any county councillors here, but I hope that is a positive decision. That's really all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gorton. Do we know anything further about the decision, Ms Corey?
I did actually receive an update from Essex County Council today, who are working with me on this. It is with National Highways. The decisions are ongoing. It's a significant chunk of investment into Brentwood. The funding cannot be reallocated for any other purpose. It has to be spent on active travel. So yeah, the decision Councillor Gorton said, it is with Essex County Council Cabinet. And actually, if we are able to proceed with it, construction won't probably start until 2027. But the funding is quite significant. It's over £3 million. And actually, if we don't have it in Brentwood, it will go elsewhere. So we will lose it. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that. Councillor Kendall.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Remember many years ago discussing cycle and walking routes, and historically funding has always been the problem because we've had some great ideas that have come up and the money's never been there. I think it would be good if it's possible just to get a breakdown of the funding, because you've got in here obviously National Highways Active Travel Funds, Section 106 monies, etc., and obviously ideally we get all the money, but if we don't get all the money and it's relying on Section 106 and some money, is there a priority? Maybe I've missed it in the report. If there's a clear priority in terms of what's going to be done first and everything else, yeah? And again, I suppose it's the timelines for this. You know, when might residents see the changes if they are cycling or wanting to go on a walking route? Thanks.
Ms. Corey.
Thank you, Councillor Kendall. The Appendix B shows the priority routes. We, as Councillor Gorton said, as the subgroup or the working group from Clean and Green, are working on the priority routes and actually looking at what's the most affordable and has most impact for Brentwood residents. So some of them are, you're talking, they're huge routes, and Essex County Council and National Highways give us a figure of £1 million per kilometre, which is staggering. So, yeah, it's looking at what we can do and what will make impact. So that's what we're working on at the moment. We are also working on Route 4A, which is within that Appendix B, which is the school linking up Shenfield Road with the school street, Sawyers Hall Lane. So we create an off-road cycle path. So that's another priority that which obviously encourage more people to get on the bikes rather than parents driving their children to school down Sawyers Hall Lane. So yeah, we're looking at the big impact projects.
Because I know a number of councillors, we were on a Teams call where they were talking about obviously the funding that's come from National Highways and the route from Harold Wood, yeah, all the way through, and I think a figure of around about £6.5 million was quoted, and obviously a lump of that was for the Brentwood section, but what you're saying is that National Highways money that's related to the change at Junction 28 were pump prime schemes right across Brentwood. It's not just that cycle scheme that money's talking about.
Apologies, no, that National Highways money from Junction 28, so the £6.5 million approximately, is split between Havering and Brentwood, only for that section. So I think it was 3.2 million quoted from Essex, which they're still working on trying to deliver. That is only for A1023. The LC WIP is a document that once we have, which obviously we do have now, we can then attract funding from other pots with National Highways, Department of Transport, and also the Active Travel Fund. And the Active Travel Fund has been released, it's number 6, is what we're working on for the development of Route 4A, so the Sawyers Hall, Merrymead Chase off-route part. So yeah, we're talking big sums of money, and then we were then looking, so we've got Counties Ear, and then we'll be looking at ATF number 7 to put that into practice. So I don't, funding-wise, without sounding rude, but I'm just trying to be honest, I don't think it's touching Brentwood's budgets because they're huge sums of money. So we're looking at national government.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? We've been remarkably nice. I'm kind of disappointed in the committee. But thank you, Ms. Corey, very much. This item is for information only, therefore no voting is required, so thank you indeed. Very useful. Item 8 is the local heritage list update. The report begins on page 241 of the agenda, and there is in turn an updated appendix as well, which has an additional item on there for you to be aware of. Ms Goodings, anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that there's a corresponding change to paragraph 1.13. It talks about 17 items assessed. That obviously is now 18 items assessed and 15 meeting the criteria because of the addendum.
Thank you. I will now move the recommendations that are set out on page 241. Do I have a second?
Happy to second that.
Thank you. We now move to the debate. I have, before we begin this, I should note you may see some items in this item that have been slightly, that actually I think it's very possible doing it, the change contenders. Of note, those around Hutton Poplars, and I want, from my personal position, just to note thanks to the officers who've worked on this and listed this. It's been very important, very useful. But also, and this is a point where I can be nice to people of another party, the 3 councillors for Hutton North who have kept on this issue on how we can support both the Hutton Poplars Lodge and Bishop's Hill Hall at the same time, and it's pleasing to see both of them being listed in there. And it is also notable that the appendix appears thanks to the persistence of one individual councillor who may speak shortly, who's read this in more detail than I did and made sure actually that something that was missed was followed up on. So thank you to him from me. And it's worth noting for the wider community that this was something that any councillors and other bodies, the parish council and others, have put forward nominations for. It's a very useful exercise, and you'll see within this recommendations in the notes the process of doing this going forward. Different trigger points have appeared, so it's very positive. But in turn, it's something that individual councillors have made a genuine impact to their community, so I think that's worth noting in this circumstance as well. And on that note, Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, can I start by thanking you personally for the way that you've engaged with myself, Councillor Patel and Councillor Pound since June on this item. Some of the comments I will make actually apply to all of the items on here, but we will focus on the 2 Hutton ones, if you will forgive us. Can I thank Paulette and Jonathan for all of their efforts and bringing this to this committee tonight, and thank you personally for doing that as well. A couple of things. It was raised to us back in June that only the dining hall in Hutton Poplars had been Grade 2 listed, and when we looked on the local heritage list, these both Poplars Lodge and Bishop's Hill buildings had been omitted, and there's no criticism there. That's just you're adding to the list constantly, and residents were concerned that 2 local heritage assets could potentially be affected in a way where consideration was not given to the history of the particular sites. In relation to these 2 sites, first of all, heritage listing helps us within the planning process to make sensitive planning decisions, and I think all of the items tonight are very worthy, and I think that, that whilst it doesn't prevent planning being approved on a particular site, it does mean that you have to be mindful and you have to take note of the fact that it's listed locally. The particular site of Hutton Poplars School is particularly important to the community. My own maternal grandmother was made an orphan at 14 and went into a workhouse. So it's a very personal one for me as well. But George Lansbury, who may not have been from my political party, was a great social reformer. And to not note the efforts of the Poplar Training School and the governors of that school and George Lansbury, and to treat it like any other building would be quite foolish and insensitive. It was all about defining educational and vocational opportunities for young children who could not, through other means, achieve something in life. So it's a particularly special location, and we are quite lucky to have 3 major assets still remaining within the footprint of the original school. Many people will know that Queen Mary visited the school in 1919. The dining hall is Grade 2 listed. However, the school building itself failed to reach Grade 2 listing However, if anyone who went along to the Model Rail exhibition that happened earlier this year would have seen the vaulted ceiling and the gallery within the inside of the building. It's particularly impressive. The main building is set back from the road, so much of the architecture may not be visible to people driving past. But the Poplars Lodge, which is right on the entrance of Poplar Drive and Rayleigh Road, is highly visible. And the three heritage assets together, I would say, are fitting tribute. And I pay tribute to everyone who made sure that the Grade 2 listing of the dining hall took place, because that was very important as well. We would hope that you approve these two tonight. And we also think that by listing these as local heritage assets, we can speak as one voice as a council to say that these assets are extremely important to us. And I would also suggest that perhaps in the future, we might look at how we can actually look at heritage events in sites such as Hutton Poplars School and wayfinding around the borough, because a lot of people will walk past the buildings and not know the history and the context, and particularly it's been suggested to me by local to us by local residents that it would form a very good site for local schools to have heritage trips to actually appreciate the history that's around them. So for all those reasons, we would strongly recommend you to approve the list tonight, including these two in Hutton Poplars. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barber. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this item? Councillor Chinnery.
Thank you, Chair. Just to kind of completely agree with what Councillor Barber says about Hutton Poplars and Bishop's Hill. As a Hutton councillor, I know this has been of significant concern to residents, and I do think that idea of having kind of some wayfinding, some signs for our to kind of showcase our heritage to school children and others is a really, really good idea. I know in kind of really nice small American towns I often spend time, and they do a very good job at that, and I think we can learn a bit more from that, and it will help us all appreciate some of those some of the really nice old buildings that should be protected. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chinnery. Councillor Gorton.
Thank you, Chair. May I, like Councillor Barber, thank Paulette for her help in getting items on this list. In my case, obviously I'm thinking of those in Ingatestone and Freining. In particular, the old beer house in Beggar Hill, which has recently been threatened with redevelopment. So I'm very glad to see it here. And I'm sure Ingatestone Parish Council are glad to see the beer house, Haybridge House and the Stars and Stone in Freining on the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gorton. Mr McAllister, thank you for the work on this. B, is there anything you'd like to mention on this report at all, or any items of highlight? You don't have to, but feel free if you would so desire, given you have joined us here tonight.
Thank you, Chair. I think really for us, it's been a pleasure to do this. And as you say, Councillor Barber, it's a living list. There was an unusual item on there, which I'm sure you all have seen, which were the cottages in Whalley, which was something that we hadn't, the regiment houses, which we hadn't expected to find. And I suppose it just shows that through, it's the community as well who can contribute to the list. And if we don't kind of share the stories, then that local significance is gone. So yeah, but a happy reading, and I'm glad that members are happy with what's been recommended from us as independents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs David.
First of all, lovely to see you, Paula. Welcome. Massive, just a point of interest. I'm totally in agreement with everything everybody said. Do you ever get kickback from any of the owners of the properties because they may have had ideas of development in their mind?
It's a very good question. Very good question. Most people that we've notified, even when it isn't on a local list, because a local list is a living list. So in planning terms, if we are assessing a site and we say it's a non-designated heritage asset, regardless of whether it's on the list, more often than not, people are really pleased because they know they've got something special. It really becomes a point of communication when we have had pushback in that being locally listed doesn't preclude development, but it informs architecture, and conservation is about moving forward in an informed manner. So if anything, it helps the dialogue. So I'm hoping that these are well received. Residents will be notified. We have a letter, and it will go on the interactive map, and we're here to kind of explain to them that it doesn't affect their permitted development rights or anything. So we shall see, but good question, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? No. Thank you. Councillor Cloak, would you like to add anything?
Nothing to add from my side, thanks.
Thank you. We will now vote on the recommendations on page 241 of the agenda. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, members. Item 9 is the duty to cooperate response to Basildon Borough Council. The report begins on page 281 of the agenda. Ms Goodings, anything to add?
Nothing to add, thank you, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I will move the recommendations set out on page 281. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that, thank you.
Thank you. Just before we go to the debate, I'd like members to note that this obviously the response written by officers in genuinely courteous language, but it's the first time I've seen a planning response that uses the phrase will not agree and impossible, which I quite enjoyed reading, and I've interpreted slightly differently in terms of officer speak, but something we can't necessarily repeat at this committee. Councillor Kendall.
I got the impression Ms Gooding had some doubts. No, I think it's an interesting one, because I think any of us who've looked over the border over the years got some of the history of what's been going on in Basildon. There are issues, as I understand it, with a local development plan prior to change of administration, and I think the fact that we originally, with Dunton Garden development, it was going to be a joint proposal, which covered land in Basildon and Brentwood, and then Basildon made a decision not to pursue this. And when you think of the amount of work that this council has put into the whole Dunton Garden Village project, particularly with the parish council and with local residents over a number of years, I mean, it's been immense. I mean, it's gone on for a long, long time. I think if I lived down in West Horsham, where I'd be very concerned is proposals that they're hearing about in Basildon and in Thurrock, which don't seem to be having as much thought put through, as what's happened with Dunton Garden Village. All of a sudden you're moving from a very small village to potentially a new town, and I'm sure people down there are horrified. I admire the front of the letter, but I mean, almost I just can't believe they've sent it, So I think the response is right, and it's the right one to send. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kendall. Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Murphy.
I just agree with everything that's been said, and I think you've been very polite and very professional. I would not have put it like that, quite.
Councillor Poppy.
Yeah, no, I mean it's quite ridiculous actually, and it is a nicely written letter, because I would have started with the words, "Are you having a laugh?" And as Councillor Kendall just said, I mean the whole thing was originally a joint project in the Dunton Garden Village. I mean it's for Basildon to come on with this is just incredible, really. But and as the letter points out, we've got to find 140 pitches now for ourselves, let alone finding some for them. So it's incredible, but no, it's good letter. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to speak on this item? Okay, no. Councillor Rossing.
Quite flippantly, I'd happily deliver it and and maybe just explain the contents in another manner.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Councillor Cloak.
Nothing to add, thank you. I think it's all been said.
Thank you very much, members. We will now vote on the recommendations on page 281 of the agenda. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, members. Item 10 is the 2025-26 Q2 performance. The report begins on page 291 of the agenda. Mrs Barnes, anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. Only to point out that obviously this performance report does probably cut across some other committees as well, but the data does get reported here, but we can pick that any changes up. It's 2:15. It's still work in progress, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I will move the recommendation set out on page 291. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Cloak. Does anyone wish to speak on this item? That makes life very easy for me. Thank you, members. Would you like to? No? Fantastic. We'll now move to vote on the recommendations on page 291 of the agenda. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, members. That concludes the agenda this evening, and therefore I'd like to close this meeting and thank you all very much and have a great rest of the evening. Thank you.